Lucius Seneca, How to Cope with the Loss of a Loved One and Overcome Grief. Seneca says that when a loved one passes away, it is important to recognize the inevitability of what is happening. Everything that exists is subject to the laws of nature, where every beginning leads to an end. Even comparing the strongest human creations with the actions of nature makes it clear that nothing is eternal. This awareness helps to accept the loss and view it as part of the universal order. Grief and sorrow are natural, but it is important to remember that everyone faces loss, and in this, we are all equal. The laws of nature are the same for all. The strong and the weak, the rich and the poor, all experience loss. This equality can soften the feeling of injustice and remind us that grief is a shared human experience. One should not demand exceptions from life for oneself or their loved ones, because the world will not provide salvation for one household while ignoring its own laws. Instead of resisting the inevitable, it is better to accept it as part of a grand design, where even the greatest creations are destined to disappear. Nature is structured to balance all in this shared process. It is this understanding that helps not to get stuck in pain, but to find the strength to move forward, following the natural course of events. Seneca teaches that mourning the loss of a loved one does not benefit either the departed or the mourner. He emphasizes that prolonged sadness is pointless, as it cannot change what has happened. If suffering and tears could fix anything, he says, he himself would continue to cry, but he understands that it is futile. Seneca points out that fate, despite its apparent injustice, only strikes within the realms of possibility. He reflects on how even the most successful and virtuous people are not immune to loss, because life is structured in such a way that every person is vulnerable to some extent. However, according to Seneca, a person can overcome loss by relying on the virtues and resilience they possess. For example, the loss of material goods is not a threat to someone who does not value them. The loss of friends can be overcome if a person is able to make new ones, and a good reputation cannot be destroyed by external circumstances if it has been earned through honest work. In his reflections, Seneca urges not to waste energy on meaningless sorrow, but to accept the blows of fate with dignity, understanding that they are simply part of the overall course of life. Seneca emphasizes that even great losses, which seem unbearable, should be viewed as part of the inevitable order of things. He argues that a person should strive to rise above suffering, realizing that true value lies not in physical existence, but in the achievements of the mind, spirit, and creativity, which remain eternal. Seneca emphasizes that if a person has taken care of their intellectual and moral legacy, even death cannot take away their achievements. Great works and virtues continue to live on in the memory of generations as long as the culture and language in which they were created endure. In this way, he reminds us that life is measured not by its length, but by the meaning of what a person leaves behind. In the case of the loss of a loved one, Seneca suggests not falling into despair, but finding comfort in the recognition of their virtues and legacy. He advises remembering that grief changes nothing and benefits neither the living nor the departed. Instead, one should focus on those qualities and virtues that made the person worthy of love and respect. Seneca also notes the injustice of fate, which often strikes those who least deserve it. However, according to him, wisdom and resilience allow one to overcome these blows, understanding them as part of the universal law of nature. In his message, Seneca touches on an important philosophical thought. The suffering imposed by fate is inevitable, but how we relate to it depends on us. He reflects on how complaints about fate and the bitterness of loss are a natural reaction, yet they do not change what has happened. Fate, in his view, is harsh and merciless to all, regardless of virtues, status, or merits. Seneca offers a philosophical approach to overcoming grief. Instead of surrendering to sorrow, one should find inner peace. Resilience of spirit, in his view, is the only thing that helps withstand the blows of fate. He asserts that complaints and tears will not ease suffering, but will only prolong it. The nature of human life, as Seneca notes, is inherently accompanied by suffering. The cry of a newborn symbolizes this. He emphasizes that suffering is an integral part of life, and we must approach it with an understanding of its inevitability. Instead of useless tears, he calls for restraint and acceptance. This approach protects the soul from the destructive influence of grief and preserves its strength for other, more important tasks. This passage ends with Seneca's reminder that, despite the constant reasons for sorrow, we must learn to find inner resilience and peace. Seneca continues his reflections on grief, urging us to focus on the futility of excessive sorrow and tears. He emphasizes that grief brings no benefit to either us or the one we mourn. If the deceased still retains the ability to feel, they surely do not want to see our suffering, and if they feel nothing, then our tears are entirely meaningless. Seneca emphasizes that expressions of grief, such as excessive tears, are not only useless but also contradict the very essence of love and respect for the deceased. If the loved one truly mattered, they would have preferred to see us resilient, continuing to live and fulfill our duties. Emotional weakness and ostentatious grief, on the other hand, may hinder our progress, thus going against what the deceased would have wanted. The philosopher also addresses the concept of social duty. Even while in a state of grief, a person must maintain dignity and be a source of comfort for their loved ones. Grief expressed excessively can not only oppress others, but also create the appearance of weakness, which contradicts the nobility of spirit. The main idea is the necessity of inner control. If grief cannot be overcome, it should be concealed so that it does not interfere with others or ourselves. Resilience in the face of loss, according to Seneca's beliefs, is an expression of true respect for the departed and a manifestation of strength of character. Seneca emphasizes the importance of social duty and the role a person plays in the eyes of others. He points out that the higher the position a person occupies, the more is expected from them. Grief that goes beyond reasonable bounds harms not only the individual but also their reputation and their ability to fulfill the duties imposed on them by fate. The philosopher reminds us that a person who is in the public eye must be an example of courage and resilience. When all eyes are on you, you do not have the right to weakness, which could disappoint those who believe in your strength of spirit. Seneca stresses that a great person should not allow suffering to undermine their ability to act and make decisions. He offers practical ways to cope with grief: distraction through travel, diversifying one's activities, or taking a break from intense work. However, the key is not to let emotions control oneself, especially if one is responsible for many tasks and lives. A person must meet expectations if they strive for high ideals and the respect of others. This is not just a requirement of society, but a duty to oneself, to one's inner essence. Seneca gives practical advice on how to deal with grief when one is alone. He emphasizes the importance of immersing oneself in work, intellectual pursuits, and creativity to distract the mind from sorrowful thoughts. According to the philosopher, the soul becomes particularly vulnerable in moments of calm, when there are no external distractions to prevent it from returning to grief. Seneca suggests finding comfort in literary activities and research, which are not only a source of inspiration but also a means of preserving inner balance. He believes that focusing on serious topics and the great legacy created by others can strengthen the spirit and provide the strength needed to overcome internal pain. Special attention is given to the idea of gradual transition, starting with serious and demanding activities, and then smoothly moving to lighter and more joyful topics. According to Seneca, this approach will help the soul restore its balance without unnecessary strain. He suggests distinguishing between two motivations for grieving the departed: mourning for oneself or for the departed. If one mourns for oneself, it is an expression of personal weakness, as such grief is not genuine love for the one who has passed. However, if one mourns for the departed, it is important to realize that grief is useless for them. They have either attained bliss or lost all feeling, being free from earthly suffering. Seneca emphasizes that death frees us from all the sufferings, dangers, and anxieties inherent in life. The departed no longer faces illness, envy, fear, or the instability of fate. Even what seemed like a blessing in life, such as wealth or power, brought about envy and tension, which the departed have now overcome. The philosopher concludes that mourning the dead is either envy of their bliss or madness, for death frees one from all earthly worries. He invites us to realize that the truly happy are those who are no longer burdened by the desire for earthly goods, for true happiness lies in the absence of dependence on the external world. When a close one passes away, the first thing to understand is that death is not the end. It is the completion of a journey we must all undertake. We are all in this turbulent sea of life, where we experience both tides of happiness and ebbs of misfortune. Each of us will one day face shipwreck, but it is important to understand that death is not the enemy. It is what frees us. There is no need to fear the future, nor to grieve as if something has been lost forever. Fear and worry are common reactions, but they do not change the essence of the situation. Life is an eternal struggle with anxieties, changes, and losses. Death is a form of liberation, an escape from all these agonies. You may envy the deceased, who is already free. They have gone, and now feel neither fear nor pain. They have left everything behind and enjoy eternal silence, freedom from all earthly concerns. You have not lost them. They have simply outpaced you on this journey. They have not gone. They have led the way. They have achieved what we all seek: liberation from suffering, from worry, and from the eternal striving for something that always eludes us. Instead of mourning, view death as completion, as liberation. Do not fixate on the fact that you will not see them again. They have become part of something greater, something that cannot be lost. And what must you do? Accept it with gratitude. Life is not an endless struggle, but a brief moment we must live with dignity, knowing that everything has an end, and that this is not an end, but the beginning of something new. When a loved one passes, it is important to remember that loss is neither an offense nor an injustice. On the contrary, you should perceive this loss as a blessing, for you are granted the opportunity to enjoy their presence and affection. Do not focus on how short their life was or how much more time they could have spent with you. What matters is appreciating the moment you were given and rejoicing in the fact that you had such a noble person by your side. When you face loss, remember that it is not a coincidence or injustice. Death is a natural conclusion to life. Your soul must find peace in the fact that you were blessed with such attachment and that this person was part of your life. Although their presence was temporary, it is important to view it as a blessing, not as an injustice. Joy does not lie in how much time you spent together, but in the very fact that you were together, even if only for a short time. Do not grieve because death took them away sooner than you would have liked. This is not bad luck, but the natural course of things. The fact that they are gone does not diminish the happiness their existence brought into your life. Death is part of the natural order, and it is important to learn to accept it with gratitude for the moments it has brought. We all, from ordinary people to great generals and famous authors, cannot escape this fate. Death comes for everyone, and it does not matter who you were or what you accomplished in your life. When a loved one passes, it is important to find strength in what remains, rather than focusing on the loss. Look at those who are still with you, your family, your friends. Their support and care can be the comfort that helps you overcome the pain. Death should not be the reason to lose everything that is dear to you. On the contrary, it must be seen as a part of life, not as an absolute disaster. Do not forget that your grief, though important, should not overshadow your attention to those who are still alive and who are also going through this moment. You must remain strong and be a support for them, for your ability to endure loss with resilience will be important for everyone around you. Only you can set an example of how to face death with strength and wisdom. Remember the great examples set by strong personalities, such as Emperor Caesar. He was not just a symbol of power, but also an example of how to endure personal loss while ruling an empire with greatness and courage. Draw inspiration from such examples and do not let a painful loss blind you. All that remains is the ability to continue living, relying on what remains, and drawing wisdom from the most difficult situations. When we face the loss of a loved one, it is important to realize that fate, no matter how cruel it seems, is inevitable for everyone. It touches everyone, leaving nothing untouched, and nothing, not even sacred places or greatness, can be shielded from its arrival. Funeral processions pass through all homes, and it does not matter what status or merits the departed had. Death is inevitable for all, including those who seem particularly worthy. Do not be surprised or offended by fate. It is an immutable law that we all face, and our curses or prayers cannot change its course. We can rebel against it, but it will not alter its path. It is important to understand that we cannot change what is predestined, and although the pain of loss is heavy, we must accept the inevitability because attempts to change it only lead to suffering. The path to inner peace lies in accepting this inevitability and understanding that even the highest titles and accomplishments cannot protect us from death. Accept it as part of life, and in this way, you'll find the strength to support yourself and others. In moments of grief, it is not wise to fall into extremes, distracting yourself with superficial entertainment or preserving the memory of the deceased in a cruel or senseless form. Seneca teaches that in such moments, we should not allow ourselves to become weak or lose our dignity. Grief, of course, is inevitable, but it is important to bear it with courage, following the example of worthy people who do not forget their virtue, even in difficult times. In his reflections on death and loss, Seneca emphasizes that while grief is a natural process, it should not destroy our inner peace. He asserts that in moments of sorrow, it is important to maintain calm and continue living according to our principles and interests. Seneca advises that even during periods of loss, a person should not change their way of life but, on the contrary, deepen their engagement in activities that foster personal growth and bring fulfillment, such as philosophy and scholarly pursuits. These practices become sources of comfort and help reduce suffering. Rather than building material monuments to the departed, Seneca suggests creating spiritual monuments, works that will be preserved in people's memories far longer than any physical monument because they are tied to the spirit and legacy. Thus, the best memories of the deceased are found in the deeds they left behind in the world. However, Seneca does not encourage completely avoiding grief. He acknowledges that the loss of a loved one inevitably causes sorrow but emphasizes the importance of balance. Excessive grief only exacerbates suffering, and one should avoid turning sorrow into a meaningless and destructive emotion. In Seneca's view, a person should accept grief as an inevitable part of life, but strive to maintain reason and spiritual balance, even in the most difficult situations. Reflecting on death and the loss of a loved one, Seneca advises approaching this sorrowful situation with wisdom and inner harmony. He acknowledges that grief is a natural reaction, and tears may flow, but it is important that they do not overwhelm the soul and become a permanent state. He teaches how to manage emotions so that one may be worthy of approval from both wise people and loved ones, and also not forget the importance of memories. Seneca recommends that the memories of a departed person should not bring fear or sorrow but should, on the contrary, become a source of pleasant reflection. To keep the memory of the person alive and bright, focus on their virtues, hard work, skill, and faithfulness to their promises. These positive memories will support inner peace and provide strength for further life. Thus, in moments of loss, it is important not only to experience grief, but to transform it into something that strengthens the soul, reminding us of the virtues and achievements of the departed, not just their absence.